Hey, welcome to the Star Wars Unlearned podcast. My name is Josiah Shuett, and I'm joined by Nathan Hawley. What we're doing is we're looking at Star Wars from the perspective of its creator. So we're turning off our fan brains and really just trying to uncover the story that Lucas is trying to tell. We're in the middle of our series on the Phantom Menace, where we explore the filmmaking, the history, the mythology, and everything else that Lucas and his team used to bring this first chapter of the Star Wars saga to life. So join us as we dive in and unlearn what we have learned about the Star Wars story. For it. What stands out to you about this scene?
We talked about earlier if we think he's lying or not. I remember that in a previous episode. If C.O. Bibbo's lying or not. I'm trying to remember what we concluded. I think you said he's lying based on the script, right?
I think it was pretty clear that the people are dying was a real thing that was happening. You know, the death toll is catastrophic. That's not an exaggeration. But according to the original screenplay, and it doesn't seem like George changed his mind on that, even though some of those lines of dialogue were omitted. People are still, the situation is bad. They're being targeted. They're being killed. And in fact, officials are being targeted, like the governor himself. And actually in the last scene kind of confirms it, because what did Gunray say? He said, like, your people are starving and you are going to die much sooner than your people, I'm afraid. And so Gunray is not even, trying to hide the fact that their intention is to kill them if they don't cooperate. So I think, his message is legitimate. Whether or not it was sent as bait or whether or not he sent it with good intentions, not knowing it could be tracked or traced or something like that. That's still a little unclear to me. Maybe it's really obvious and someone will correct us, but I think it's clear that the threat is real. I just don't know exactly. Yeah, I think it's maybe at this point, I'm assuming it's supposed to be ambiguous whether or not it was sent out to lure them back to Naboo or not. I think it probably is, but we'll see.
Which is very Sith-like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're not going to tell you.
Yeah, it's consistent with their character for sure.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, I remember that one. I was just noticing how dark the room is. You get the sense that everyone's kind of napping, or maybe it's however they judge nighttime or like their sleep cycle. I guess what I mean by that, because they're obviously in space and it's always dark. But Jar Jar's out. He's taking a nap. Anakin looks like he's supposed to be sleeping. I don't know, but it's just interesting to me how dark it is. Earlier, I feel like the scenes that we've seen inside the ship are just a little bit lighter, and just to me, it makes you kind of feel cold, like you feel the cold that Anakin is talking about. Where Padmé looks over at him. It's like, I'm so cold. But I don't know. Is there a reference to this? The cold is often referenced or tied to the dark side. Is there anything to that here intentionally, or is it just kind of a coincidence? Because Anakin,
I don't know, because I thought about this. Yeah, I thought about that when I was reviewing this scene. I thought, the next time we see Anakin say that he's cold, it's when he's being tested by the Jedi, and that's when Yoda senses the dark side in him. And it's the exact same scenario that Luke goes through in Dagobah when he says, I feel cold, and Yoda says, that place is strong with the dark side of the Force, when he's talking about that tree. And so, yeah, that coldness does seem to precede, the dark side doing something or making a move. My instinct is to say here that that's not the case, because this isn't the scene doesn't deal with the dark side really. Right. I think because Padmé addresses it in the scene, she just says, space is cold and he's used to a very, very warm planet. So I think in this case, the coldness is just a temperature thing. That's what I'm tempted. That's what I'm going to go with. But I'm not, there could be something else that's really obvious that I'm not seeing that is a connection to the dark side, but I don't see it right now. So for now, I'm just going to say I think it's just the temperature, but we'll see. But we could be wrong about that.
Yeah, that's the most natural reading of it, I would think. Just it's literally cold. Yeah, Padmé talks about it, but I just find it interesting because he feels cold here, and then it instantly brought my mind back to Luke, and then again in front of the Jedi, and then he talks about here how he misses his mom. That's kind of the scene here, which is kind of that pathway in the fear. I'm afraid I miss my mom. I don't know. I could be, like you said, I could be totally reading into that.
Well, that's a good point, because he brings up the missing of the mom also comes up in that scene with the Jedi when he's also feeling cold. So they could be, actually, they're probably, maybe that is the connection. That could be it. Yeah, I have to explore that a little bit more. But that's, if there is any key to that larger sense of the dark side at play, then it probably is that. You're right, what you brought up. So yeah, I'll have to look into that. That's interesting. It's a good place to start. Huh.
Yeah, I don't know if that's legit or not, but it's interesting to me too, kind of as we're thinking about it, that Padme is the one who rises up to kind of care for him in this moment, where we sort of see the baton being handed off from mom to future wife, how that, and both of those will plant seeds for the dark side, even though it's not a bad in and of itself, but Palpatine will manipulate it, right? But yeah, I just find it interesting to see that. Again, I could be reading into that, but it's a sweet scene.
I think you're right.
I like it. I like how Padme's the one. Like we just get this time with them alone, which is kind of a neat thing. That's how they started out, was really alone. Their first conversation, really. And yeah, and then let's see if I can pronounce this right. The Japor snippet is right, I think what it is. I was going to ask you, I'm sure you have a ton of thoughts on this scene, but I'm just curious on what your thoughts are on what that is, or if there's any meaning behind it, or if it's just kind of a neat thing George has made up. And just like, if there's, I don't know, I was just curious, like what his thoughts were in this, if it's just a momentum or like a little trinket, or if George was actually thinking deeper with that little Japor snippet.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it has several reasons for being there. What it is, it just seems to be a very simple little wooden carving little pendant that he's given her. Actually, I have the screenplay right in front of me, and it says Anakin hands a wooden pendant to Padme. So it's I always wondered if it was like bone or what was made. I guess it's supposed to be some kind of wood. But I think, yeah, the fact that it's a gift that he gives to her in a moment where she's very low, she's very depressed. Like this whole scene starts out, like he's pointed out, it's dark. It's like in the screenplay says the ship is asleep. So it's nighttime, it's dark, everyone's asleep, but she's awake, and that's always a sign of, when someone can't sleep, something's bothering them, right? And there's no doubt what is bothering her, right? She's kind of able to maybe ignore, she was unburdened, maybe that's the way to say it. She was unburdened with the plight of her people while they're on Tatooine, because they had other stuff to deal with that was right in front of them. But now they're on their way, the ship's working, they're good to go. And so that the day that she's going to have to make a very, very difficult decision is getting closer and closer. And so that's why the scene starts with her looking at that message, right? It's her looking at it again, and you can see on her face she's tired, she's upset, she's just really wrestling with it. And so obviously losing sleep over it. So and so the fact that Anakin is there for her in this moment where she's very, very depressed, where it's very, very sad and she doesn't know what to do, he's there for her. And I think the pendant, the Japor snippet, is a gift for her, just something to maybe brighten her day a little bit in this moment. And I think for her, or for him rather, she's also there for him, right?
That's just what I was thinking.
He can't sleep. They're both the only two people who are still awake. They both can't sleep. They're both concerned about their homes, about their family, essentially. And and when they're at their lowest, when Padme and Anakin find strength in each other, which is like the first example of that, which of course they're going to keep finding that in the next movie, and that's what leads them to get married and to start this relationship that they have. And Padme understands that he's missing his mother, right? He says, I care for you too, only I, and she finishes his sentence for him. Whereas, she's very understanding, very like empathetic. She's right there. Immediately she knows what's going on. And then in the Jedi, it's funny, this scene plus this scene compared to the Jedi Council testing scene is very interesting, because the Jedi go about it in a much more less caring way. They're much more he says like, your thoughts go on your mother, you're afraid to lose her, and Anakin has to tell them, I miss her. That's what, like, duh. He's kind of, they're a little not quite as tuned into that. Um, they're still. It's not like they're still right about his attachment with his mother being a problem because that is what turns him into Vader. But eventually, they could be a little nicer about it. They could be a little more kind and empathetic. So it's just
Yeah.
great that they both find someone to talk to that they can actually understands them. Because Padme can't go to the Jedi with her problems because she's still in disguise. She can't go to the Jedi without compromising her security. And so there's this little boy who actually is very open, and he asks, he goes to her or he what's the word mm, like he asks her about it. Like he says, you seem sad, and she's talking about him, but then he throws it back to her, and so they clearly do care about each other as friends at this point. There's that bond, that relationship, and they have a similar problem. They're far away from home, and they're kind of sad about it. And and in her case, she's got um, a huge war and death and all that horrible things to deal with, and she's only 14, right? So it's a big thing to deal with. So with all that being said, I think that Japor snippet really does do a lot for her in that moment. She's like, oh, she says, my caring for you, I don't need this to remember you by. She's like, you mean a lot to me. You've helped me so much. He's helped her more than anyone else in the movie really so far. Maybe aside from the Jedi and Jar Jar, but he's been either way, he's been a huge help along the way. And so she's very, very grateful. I do think it's a little funny that he says, we see this Japor snippet and he gives it to her. He says, what does he say? He says, it'll bring you good fortune. And it's funny. I think it's just ironic that the last time we see that, it's on her corpse. So not so much the good fortune there. It's just, so it's tragic, but also it's just like, that pendant will have a lot more. It becomes a symbol of their relationship, and of course, it gets buried with her, and so that's an image that definitely tells you something. So that's looking way ahead, but yeah, I like this little scene because it kind of is their second scene that is sort of builds. The first scene was them with just the two of them, was them meeting and kind of taking those first steps in their relationship, and this one is kind of them kind of building the really first big connection after they've gone through an ordeal on Tatooine and about to start another. They find strength in each other in a very, very dark place. So it's a cool scene. I love this scene.
Yeah, I do too. It's very sweet,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know if this is legit or not, but I found this in the book. It says the Japor ivory wood snippet obtained by Anakin through trading. So I guess he got it through trading. Okay. And they have traditional Tatooine sand symbols on it. Pretty cool. So
yeah, that might be associated with the whole being good fortune. Like he traded it because like, oh, this will be worth something. Except, did he say he carved it out of a? Did he say he carved it himself?
Oh, you're right. Maybe he got the wood out of the by trading.
Oh, okay. He gotcha. Yeah. Okay, I was like, wait a second. Yeah, that's right. I carved it out of the Japor snippet, right? Yeah.
Who knows if that's cool. Legit or not? That's one of those DK.
I mean, yeah. Well, it's good. It's good to put the little asterisk there and say this isn't from George, but it's still, if the idea supports what Lucas has been doing, then why not? It's a cool idea. But another random. This has nothing to do with like the theme or the story going on here, but it's one of the few times we see a practical Jar Jar. Is in this. He's not CGI. In the shot of Anakin with his feet up on the desk. I always just like seeing that because you get to see a bit of that original Jar Jar costume, or maybe it might have been just a specific puppeteering little rig just for that shot or something. But I think the rest of the scene he's CG, but just for that shot, looking over the table at Anakin, you see his little, well, not little, very long practical legs.
That's cool.
Like twitching in his sleep. Yeah, we see him in a couple other scenes. We see like little bits of Ahmed Best in the suit, usually just for like close-ups or inserts here and there. It's like, I think when he picks up that little tool he's working on the pod racer with that he loses and he gets his tongue all caught in the beam. I think that hand picking it up, I think that's a practical shot as well, because that would have been very hard to do with CG back then. But anyway, that's just a random little, like, I like visual effects and special effects, and so
absolutely
that stands out. I'm like, oh, it's cool because everyone kind of thinks of Jar Jar as being a totally CGI character, and it's like, well, actually, there's a couple of shots where he's not.
That's really cool. Yeah, I wouldn't have known that. Yeah, that's neat. I was also thinking while you're saying this, again, I don't know if this is legit. I don't know if this is from George or not, but both times now we've had this kind of one-on-one scene with Anakin and Padme. We get that little glimpse of the dark side, like what's to come. Because like you said, the first time he gets angry when she says you're a slave, you see that outburst, and here it's that fear of mom, or missing his mom, the attachment. So, in the cold. Again, I don't know, we could be reading into that, but it's just kind of interesting to see.
It is interesting. I do want to. Yeah, it seems like there is probably something deeper to the scene that I haven't really looked at before. But yeah, you're right about that. Where it is kind of. Anakin always has this. Yeah, there's this undercurrent of darkness. It's always there from the very beginning. It's not bubbling up to the surface yet. So it's not super obvious to someone who doesn't know the full story yet, because it makes sense. He's a kid. He misses his mom. And, it made sense before. Like, you don't want to be a slave. You don't want to be called a slave when you're a kid. So both of those kind of reactions make sense in the moment. But in the larger context, you could definitely see them as seeds that grow for sure. So that's a good call. That's a good point.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. It could be just totally my reading too much into things. No. Yeah. But I do remember this moment as a kid when I watched that scene. I remember the music has always stuck out to me in that scene, but also I really I remember thinking as a kid, I think I was 10 or 12 when I first saw this, and I remember going, "Oh, I think that's Luke's mom."
Oh, really? Wow!
It was like that moment
smart
where
kid.
it was like, "Ooh, I think that's the point where that's going to be her."
That's smart.
Yeah,
wow,
that's what it kind of dawned on me. But because this is a sweet moment where you start to feel that, like, okay, there's a bond here. This is here's Anakin and there's this girl here. Yeah. And this is, I remember that as a kid. So
that's cool that you have memories of specifically learning, oh, that's who this is. And that's when, this person shows up, and you can recognize all that, because I just grew up with this weird Star Wars gumbo, just every movie in this very different, scrambled together in different order. I didn't know which character was, I didn't really know the chronology when I first saw them. I was just bombarded with Star Wars. And so I don't think I even knew that Anakin was really Vader. I don't think I made the connection, even though I'd seen, even by the time Revenge of the Sith came out, I knew what was happening. But early on, I don't know if I knew. I can't really remember when I figured out that Anakin was Vader. Because when you're a kid, the dialogue kind of just goes past you. Like, when he says, Anakin Skywalker's name comes up in the original trilogy, and Vader says, "I'm your father," and Luke's name is Luke Skywalker, and then there's this other character named Anakin Skywalker. Of course, they're connected, but when you're a kid, you kind of just wait until the next lightsaber fight pops up. So you're not like too concerned with. I'm a very little kid, So I'm not sure. I all this to say, I guess I don't think I have a lot of memories of when I specifically learned, which character was where they were going. I don't know if I knew that Ben Kenobi was Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think I did, but it's just cool that you remember you can remember the moment you figure that out. And to me, I'm very grateful that I kind of grew up with all of it and didn't really have a, it's a cool perspective to have. I think they're both interesting, and and it's interesting to hear from someone who grew up with the original trilogy. Then it had, was it 19 years, 17 years between movies? Was that, maybe it was more than that? I can't remember exactly.
The dark times.
Yeah, exactly. To it. Exactly, because you caught a couple of those years, but you were young enough that you didn't have to wait as long. So
yeah.
So it's just cool to see those perspectives. And now, I remember Revenge of the Sith coming out in theaters. I was very young, but I remember when there wasn't another episode 3. And so now they're, everyone growing up now, they have all those movies already there. They can enjoy. So it's just cool that you have those specific memories, because I don't have those. Or at least not as many, not as much, especially with these early films, with the prequels coming out. I don't really have that, but
I hear you. Yeah, that's cool. That's a neat thing. I didn't think about that. How it just with my own kids. Yeah, they're growing up very similar. I mean, they'll have all of it at their hands. In fact, it's very common knowledge that Anakin is Vader nowadays. I mean, it's in all the books. It's in everything. So that was hard to navigate as a parent trying to introduce your kids to Star Wars.
Were you able to do that? Were you able to keep that a secret for them?
Mostly. Mostly. Until they started getting to about the age they could read. So about kindergarten.
Oh,
when they could kind of, because I'd always skip over that page. Or just not read it or whatever. but now they're like, who's this guy? Oh, and now they know for sure because they've all seen it. But
yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So it'll be interesting though because they've never seen episode 3, and I'm going to try and introduce that to at least my older ones. And I saw a thread on a Star Wars podcast or a Star Wars Facebook group I'm part of, asking when should you show your kids episode 3? And it was interesting the responses because some of them were like, it was really difficult for them to see their hero fall, and like my kid was so struggling with this, and that struck me because for me, Anakin was never my hero per se. You know what I mean? Living through this, I mean, we liked him, but I only grew up with episode 1 and 2. I didn't have the Clone Wars, or the Tartakovsky series or anything. So it was just all I had was episode 1, which is like, okay, Anakin's this cool little kid, and then episode 2, where you're kind of like, I don't know if I like this guy, Yeah, so it was really interesting to see. Because I mean, I love Anakin as in the Clone Wars, is one of my favorites. The Clone Wars turned my whole perspective around on everything. But yeah, all to say is it's very interesting to see what's going to happen and what they think and how it'll land on them, knowing all this already. So
yeah.
Huh.
It's interesting. I kind of have a in between. Well, obviously, since I am in between you and your kids, age-wise, it's not surprising, I guess, that I have an in-between sort of perspective on that because I did grow up with Anakin as my hero a little bit, but I kind of knew where it was all going from the beginning. Since I don't have those original memories of being a little kid, I don't remember. I remember seeing Star Wars before I knew what was happening, I guess is a good way of saying it. But once I was old enough to be aware of where the story was going, I don't remember that being difficult to understand. Like I could realize, oh, Anakin's going to turn into Vader in episode 3. Because I didn't watch episode 3 when it came out. That was the other movies I did, but my parents waited a little bit because I wasn't quite old enough. Because I would have been 2005. So I would have been 8 years old. So they probably waited like a year or two to show me that. I was probably more like 10 or 11 maybe. So I knew it was happening, but seeing it, was very hard to watch because, even though I didn't have the Clone Wars TV series, I had the Clone Wars micro series and I had the comics, and I got really into, I was very aware of all the ancillary stuff between episodes 2 and 3, all the Clone Wars books and novels and toys and the Lego Star Wars video games. And I loved that. I loved playing as Anakin. I loved all that. And even though he wasn't necessarily my favorite character, I think I always liked Obi-Wan more. But Anakin was always cool. I always like, oh, he's the cool one. He's got the black leather. He's got wears dark colors, and he was and he was always the cool character in Lego Star Wars to play, I think, or one of them. So, so it was hard to see Revenge of the Sith finally and go like, oh, this is Anakin. It's really rough to see him, go so far and get worse. Especially after he was so, heroic and fun and cool at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. It's like, oh, he's gotten past his, whiny teenager phase. He's good. Oh, nope. He's gotten worse. So, and then he turned Vader. So yeah, I had a kind of like in between thing, but yeah, I can't imagine, especially if some people watch, I can't remember what order you showed your kids, and you have to tell me, but I know some people watch 1, 2 Clone Wars, then 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's like, that would be really rough. Yeah, I mean, that would be really hard to see Anakin, especially when you have so long. Because Revenge of the Sith, we had, 20 minutes of him being, the best he's ever been. But then Clone Wars, that's maxed out to, 5, 6, or 7 seasons, worth. And so to see that, even with all the dark spots that, and bad things that happen in that show to him, where he isn't always the shining star, but that would be hard. That would be hard to see that. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
So what was your kid's experience?
Didn't mean to derail us there, but what?
No, that's good. I'm curious though. How did you expose your kid? I think, didn't you show them Rebels first?
They technically saw Rebels first because they were so small. And I was like, hey, let's just watch it. They didn't understand any of it. They just thought, oh, that's kind of cool. So, and they don't even remember much of it now. So it's just kind of here, check it out. This is fun, because I think I was going through it, or I just finished it or something like that. And I knew Rebels was super safe. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Like safer than all the movies combined.
Yeah, we're not gonna scar you. So
But then I did just episode 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. And then just now we're going back and doing episode 1, 2, Clone Wars. And then I'm going to show the older ones, episode 3, and then 4, 5, and 6. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Cool. I think that's the move, to do the movies first, then Clone Wars, because I struggled with that for a while, because I kept thinking, like, I love chronology. I love going in order. So I was thinking, like, oh, I'll watch Star Wars 1, 2. If I have kids or have a friend who's never seen Star Wars, I'll show them Star Wars in this in exact chronological order. But then realizing that, wait a second, there's a lot of stuff in Clone Wars that, like, kind of spoils stuff in, like, 3, 4, and beyond. It's like, because there's a lot of episodes that treat Palpatine like he's a bad guy. Like, there's like sinister shots and music, and like, wait a second, huh? And then there's like the whole vision where Anakin, there's the
Right.
Anakin in the foreground. There's a big, smoky Vader thing in the back. Like, whoa, what? No, this is a spoiler. What's going on? And I realized, oh, idiot, duh. It's supposed to be, Clone Wars is supposed to be seen, in addition to the movies. It's not like it's in support of those. So you watch the movies first, and then you watch Clone Wars to fill in the gap between 2 and 3. They're not, the Clone Wars, the story of Clone Wars proceeds as if you've already seen 1 through 6, whereas the movies don't. Episode 1 doesn't assume you've seen 4, 5, and 6, whereas Clone Wars does assume you've seen the movies. So it took me a while to realize, like, oh, I should have come to that conclusion earlier. But so I think I think the way you're doing it is the right way, where you show them the movies first and then you show them the show. Especially because the last episode of Clone Wars jumps ahead to, Vader in the snow with a bunch of stormtroopers. It's like, this is clearly not supposed to be seen, especially the last arc. You need to see Revenge of the Sith before you see that last arc. So
that's a
clearly,
good point.
So clearly, it's not meant to be seen in chronological order.
Wow, I never even thought about that. There you go. I never thought about that. Good point. I wish I took credit for that, but nope, I just did it.
Well, I mean, it worked out,
Yeah. Honestly, the reason I did it that way is because otherwise I would have done chronologically. It's just because there's a lot of dark Clone Wars episodes that were just too far beyond where my kids were at. That's the only reason I didn't. And even now we're skipping a few because there's a few in there that are just pretty intense for young guys like that. So, yeah, all the Night Sister stuff and things like that. Yeah, but
yeah, for sure. And I know it's funny that you talk about what age you show your kids, because it's like Revenge of the Sith, because it's very traumatic for the kids. And I always thought it was kind of odd. I understand the wanting to see 4, 5, 6, watching them in release order, not in chronological order. I totally understand that impulse. I don't think there's anything really wrong with it, except that if you're showing it to someone for the first time, you're going to end on a very, very bad note. Revenge of the Sith is a horrible ending to that story, because everyone who reacts, I a lot of people make fun of reaction videos on YouTube, but I like watching the Star Wars ones because I like seeing, what people pick up on who don't know anything about Star Wars. Because for me, I know everything. I know too much. So I'm trying to remind myself, okay, what does it look like to someone who doesn't know, who hasn't read the books, who hasn't read the comics, who hasn't seen the movies a million times? What do they pick up on? What's obvious? What do they not get? And so it's funny. It's cool to watch that, but they all end up with people being very upset at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Like, oh, that was really sad, like really bad note to end on. I'm like, don't you want to end with Return of the Jedi, where it's like the happy ending, where it's such a great, triumph? I'm like, for that reason alone, I'm like, you should watch prequels first, but in order, But anyway, but again, if you've already seen Star Wars, if you're doing like a Star Wars watching Star Wars marathon or something, I totally get watching it in release order. But anyway, we're sorry, completely different we're totally unrelated to anything, but it's interesting, that counts.
It is yeah, it's fun. I always recommend the chronological. That's my way of doing it, I think. But
yeah, I think that I think George really tried hard to make that chronological watch work. And even though he's said at different times what prefers people to watch it, sometimes he'll say, I think later, like, I think the most recent time he's talked about it, he said you should watch in chronological order. But I think he said before that you can kind of watch in any kind of order now, and you start to see things in different ways, which I think is very true. As Star Wars fans, we've done that. How many times have you watch episode 2, and the next time you watch, Empire or Jedi, and you're like, oh, I've totally noticed this thing from episode 2 I didn't notice before because I just watched it. So if you watch them in different orders, sometimes it brings to light things you didn't notice before. So I think it's totally valid. But yeah, chronological is, I think, I would say the best, but
yeah,
that's
there's
just
our stamp.
Yeah.
Yep. Nice.
If nothing else, you get the good ending at the end. So
yeah.
Anyway,
Agreed.
back to where we were.
Back to episode 1. Back to our regularly scheduled program.
Yeah, exactly.
All you people born after 2000 don't even know what that means. Where life was commercial. Anyway, so here we get kind of it's sort of a second introduction to Coruscant, but I feel like this is a real introduction to Coruscant. The first one where we see Maul and Sidious on it's kind of a subtle one. You're not really sure what's going on, but this one's like, here it is. Whole planet's a city. We're gonna fly through it a little bit. We're gonna show you everything. Pretty cool. And I remember being so floored with this. Like here's Coruscant. Like growing up in the old trilogy. I mean, I was kind of tail end old trilogy era. And we all knew the term Coruscant. Like it was common knowledge, but no one ever really quite knew what it was like. Like it was in the video games, all the old like PC video games, and there was so much fun. I think it was in some of the novels, things like that. But this was so cool. I remember seeing like, oh, this is what Coruscant looks like. And it's just, to me, it did not disappoint because it's just this giant city. I mean, to think of the whole planet being a city, it's just amazing. Yeah, it was really cool to me. That's my first impression. I don't know what George intended it all for Coruscant or what his thoughts were or anything like that. But Coruscant's still super cool to me. I mean, yeah, just watching this scene again, it's like, wow, it's so awesome. He just nailed it so well. But yeah, you want to take us into Coruscant, man? Tell us your thoughts and George's intentions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, just to kind of close the loop on what you were just talking about. I'm pretty sure that Coruscant was first mentioned in the Heir to the Empire trilogy, right? I don't remember if Timothy Zahn came up with the name or if it was just the first time the name showed up. Because there was an idea for in Return of the Jedi to visit a planet that was like a big city, and I can't remember if it was called Coruscant in that. No, it wasn't. It was called something else. Oh, what was the name of that? Yeah, it's like one of those. It's one of those early like names that maybe came up later. Oh, what's it called? That's gonna drive me nuts because there were 2 Death Stars in the original script for Return of the Jedi that were being constructed, and there was like and the Emperor wasn't on the Death Star. He was on the city. He was on the planet. There was like this big a bunch of buildings, architecture, and then the Emperor was in this underground like lava world. What was the name of that place? Anyway, I can't remember. We'll probably get. I'll look it up before we get to Return of the Jedi. But anyway, yeah. So I think the name might be from George, but I know that I'm pretty sure that its first appearance, at least, was in that trilogy of books. I don't know if that was if Zahn came up with the title or with the name, or if it was George. But anyway,
yeah, I'm looking it up, and it said Coruscant was first appeared in Zahn's 1991 Heir of the Empire. Yep, there you go.
Cool.
So. No, well done. I did not know that.
Cool. Star Wars nerd card.
There you go.
Confirmed. Yeah. Fan confirmed. Not a fake fan, guys. I swear I know. Yeah. Even though I never talk about the Legends or EU stuff. Yeah. So Coruscant. Yeah. You're right. It's our second look at it. Whether or not we know that it wasn't named last time we saw it. No one was there to tell us. Rick O'Lee wasn't there to tell us that it was Coruscant. It wasn't there to be exposition man and tell us that the planet is one big city and all that. We saw it in the dark. We saw it at nighttime last time, so now it's in the daylight. And I'm pretty sure that the next time we do see it at nighttime is right when they leave, which I think is interesting because I think maybe at that point the audience might recognize it, if they don't already recognize it at this point. Anyway, but yeah, so it's cool because I like the 3 planets we visit in this film. We start off with a garden, Naboo. Then we go to a desert, Tatooine, and now we go to a city. There's like the 3 different, like, kind of just as far apart as you can possibly get on the spectrum of like an environment to go to. You have this lush place full of life and green and beauty, and then you have this desolate wasteland where just the scum of the galaxy congregates. and then you have this shining, glittering city where where it's just wealth and power is. It's just you just kind of you almost have like whiplash going from all these extreme places. Like, wow, now we're going from one place to the next, and it's so different from Tatooine, so and yet also so different from Naboo. So, and it's the same time. It's this very impressive, these skyscrapers that just are like a mile high, and you just never see the bottom. You never see. There's no street floor. You never see like the bottom of the streets. But at the same time, it is it is the opposite of Naboo. It's an artificial planet. It's not entirely. It's basically a Naboo that's been corrupted. It's a garden that's been bulldozed over and built up with an office building, right? So, and it's the seat of corruption, which is and all that which is unnatural. And of course, it's where the Sith are. It's where the Sith hang out. So, yeah. So it doesn't have a sinister introduction because it's not an evil place necessarily. It's just a place where evil people can hide and can go about their business without being detected. The Death Star is the ultimate artificial planet, right? So Coruscant's kind of like this in between where it's not quite hasn't quite gone to hell in a handbasket yet, but yeah, and what I like about this introductory scene to Coruscant, especially after we land, is that it's kind of shown from Anakin's point of view. If you look at all the shots, they're all very like low angle, looking up at all the characters. You see Anakin looking from, and we see the chance of Valorum and Palpatine for the first time. It's from a child's perspective, looking up at him.
Good call. I never really thought about that. Huh.
Yeah, and it's really puts you in that perspective. You are, again, Anakin is kind of like the audience point of view character now, where Jar Jar was kind of like that before, but now we really are on board with Anakin as being the audience surrogate. And so now he's experiencing it the way we are, like, whoa, look at this place. And, he and Jar Jar, when they get in that little speeder to go to Palpatine's quarters, Jar Jar looks around, like, this is pretty hot, like, this place is cool. And he and Anakin are like, whoa. So we just get that from a very, very obvious, George is very, very blatant about that from a cinematic perspective in this scene. And I also just like the fact that Palpatine's introduction, he's introduced in this exact same way, in the same places and in the same order that we see Sidious. So we first see Sidious as a hologram, and then we see him in the flesh on Coruscant. We first see Palpatine as a hologram, and then we first see him in the flesh on Coruscant.
That's cool.
Now it's like, duh, they're the same person. Of course, they would both be on Coruscant, but just the way they're introduced, Palpatine could have visited Naboo or met them on Tatooine or something. So the fact that George waited to have him show up on Coruscant, to me, is like, okay, he's just trying to, again, leave some clues as to who he is. Again, very obvious to someone like you who'd seen the original trilogy before you saw this, or adults probably knew right away, like, okay, it's the same voice, it's the same face, it's clearly him. But for kids, that's going to maybe push them in the direction of eventually realizing, oh wait, he's the bad guy. So, and in connection to that, I like how Chancellor Valorum is portrayed in this scene and in all the scenes he shows up in, because he seems to be more likely candidate for the bad guy than Palpatine. Palpatine's all smiles, he's very friendly, and then Valorum's very kind of cold, and he's got doesn't smile that much. He doesn't express a whole lot of warmth or anything. He says, what does he say to the Queen? He says something that totally sounds like he doesn't mean it. Or, like, we're so happy, we were so concerned for whatever he says, but the way it's delivered just sounds like he doesn't care at all. And of course he's not like the greatest guy ever. He's, as Palpatine says, mired in corruption. So he's corrupt, and he's cold and not really, very that friendly and nice, but he's so because of that, he's more the obvious choice for a bad guy if you're looking for one in this scene. But Palpatine just hides it better. Palpatine's just too clever and too good of an actor that he's not. The attention is on Valorum this whole time, and that's what as a kid, that's what was apparent to me, was that Valorum, I didn't like him as a kid. I was like, this guy seems weird, and he seems like, obviously, he gets in the way of progress in this and saving Naboo. So I had much more negative feelings towards him than I did at Palpatine when I was a little kid.
Oh man, me too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was just going to comment on that. Like, I remember, even still, like, Valorum just seemed so weird to me because he's just so cold's a good word for it. I wouldn't have thought of that, but just that monotone. Yeah, we're so happy to see you alive. There there's just, yeah, that's interesting. I remember, um, I was trying to think back on when I realized Palpatine, Chancellor Palpatine, Senator Palpatine was Emperor Palpatine, and I don't think it was until Episode 2, because you don't get really the sense that he's the bad guy here at all. Exactly what you're saying. There's one little instance, or maybe two instances, where he gives kind of this dark look every once in a while, and actually he does it right here when he sees the ship landing. He has this kind of look of like, I have to deal with this, But and then the scene where he's trying to manipulate the queen a little bit, and we'll come to that. Those are the two parts where you're kind of like, something's off about this guy. But otherwise, yeah, I agree. Like Valorum was way more unlikable than Palpatine was. Yeah. So absolutely. Yeah. And I still find that interesting. I mean, he just never smiles, and he almost looks like he's just angry, like this kind of subtle, like serious, angry kind of guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I might have had an unconscious bias against him because the actor Terrence Stamp, great actor, he was in the Superman movies from the 70s. When I watched it as a kid, he played a villain in those, a very obvious villain who was like power hungry, and so I may have had more of I maybe brought that baggage with me into watching Star Wars when I saw him, even though I probably saw this first. But eventually, as a kid, again, not knowing what movies I saw first, not having a chronology of learning all these things, I just knew that guy was the guy who played the villain in Superman, and then he's here in episode 1, he's being a pain in everyone's butt. I'm like, nah, I don't like this guy. I found that the line I was referring to is where he says, "Welcome, Your Highness. It's an honor to finally meet you in person." Even that part is like, okay, you don't seem that excited to see her. And then he says, "I must relay to you how distressed everyone is over the current situation." And I'm pretty sure that maybe you can correct me, or maybe not, but I'm pretty sure that line, you don't even see his face when he says that. And just the sound of his, like, so the camera isn't even like, yeah, we don't need to see his face for this. He's not giving us anything. And it's even the sound of his voice. He just sounds like he couldn't care less. And maybe he does, but that's just the way he comes across, And yeah, so Valorum was always a very interesting. I shouldn't say always. He's become an interesting character, I think, because he does show up in Clone Wars, and I haven't seen that episode much. I need to go back and watch it again. But he has since become interesting to me because he's sort of, what Palpatine is trying to show everyone that he's not. He's basically saying, "Oh, I'm going to do the opposite of what Valorum presented. I'm going to present myself in the opposite way that Valorum did, but actually I'm way worse." And so he's a nice little, he uses Valorum in a very interesting way to, construct his spider's web.
So interesting side note here. I want to know your thoughts on this. This came up in kind of the, I don't know what you'll call it, the extended edition maybe of episode 1, because he added some scenes later on after it was released. I think they were deleted originally and then he just put them back in. But there's a scene here where Qui-Gon turns to Valorum and says the situation has gotten much more complicated. And Anakin turns around and he just looks at him like, "What? What did you just say? What do you mean by that?" And Qui-Gon kind of frowns and kind of does this hand motion of like, "Get going, keep going." And I find that very interesting. And I don't know what, like, Qui-Gon and Anakin both kind of snap at each other in the sense of like, not like in words, but they both look at each other like really quick. Like, what? Like Anakin snaps back and looks at him, and then Qui-Gon snaps and looks at him, So what's going on there? Like,
well, first of all, I have a question for you. That's a change. Yeah. It's a special edition change, or a change.
Yeah, I think so, isn't it?
I don't know about it. No.
I'm pretty sure it is, because I thought it, as soon as Qui-Gon finished that line, I thought it ended there. But now, like with Jar Jar getting in the speeder and all that, I don't think that was a part of the original. Jar Jar saying it's pretty hot, all that stuff.
Okay, interesting.
And I always wondered like where that came back. So
interesting. Okay, because I knew about the extended sequence of that speeder going through the city again. Like you see more of Coruscant as it kind of flies through. So I knew about that special, or I don't, not really special edition change, but like change for like the home video release, like DVD or something. But it's interesting you say that Qui-Gon's line is at the end of the scene, because I was looking at the illustrated screenplay today and noticed that that was out of order because, at least to my mind, like, oh, this is kind of slightly out of order because in the screenplay, um, the scene does finish with Qui-Gon saying, "I must speak with the Jedi Council immediately, Your Honor. The situation has become much more complicated." Or he's in this case, he just says more complicated in this screenplay. But and before that, Anakin looks back because because Padme is like, come with me," and he's just kind of looking back to get permission from Qui-Gon to go, "No, you're good. You can go along." And that's still what happens here, but it's true that Anakin kind of reacts to Qui-Gon saying the situation has become much more complicated. Um, at least it looks like he's reacting to that, rather than asking, looking, "Hey, can I?" Because that's Padme says, come on," after that. Like it's like the very next shot. So it is interesting. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, and if that is an edit change I did, or for the home release or the DVD or whatever it is, I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that. So the screenplay just says that Jar Jar and Anakin start to follow, then stop, noticing that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are staying with the Supreme Chancellor. Queen Amidala waves to the duo to follow her. And interesting, it's Queen Amidala, not Padme. Anakin looks back to Qui-Gon and he nods to go ahead. So then Anakin, Jar Jar, and the Queen, Palpatine, they all join in the speeder, and Jar Jar says, "The Queen's being grossly nice, Misa Tinks." So that part is the Jar Jar part is in the screenplay.
Interesting.
So it might have been I don't remember what, I mean, obviously I didn't grow up with I remember the VHS version of Phantom Menace. I don't remember how different that was from the DVD very well. I know that there's more pod race stuff, and I know there was like scenes like the speeder traveling more. So I don't know that version as well because mostly I grew up with the DVD version. So I think the version as it is now. So I'd have to go back and check that. But yeah, maybe Anakin thinks that the complicated situation is about him, like not just the Sith thing. And I don't know. That's a good question. I would have to do more homework on that. I'm not exactly sure.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because the way it's edited makes it look like Anakin heard that when he wasn't supposed to,
Yeah.
And Qui-Gon kind of stops, like, "Whoops, you weren't supposed to hear that." So I just wonder. I wonder what's going on there. That could be you could be right. I never even thought about that. That's just he's just looking back to be like, "Oh, can I go with these guys, or how come you're not coming?" And it's just edited weird. I don't know.
Because clearly it was shot on the day. Like it wasn't like something they added, like did some CGI thing, where Han Solo steps over Jabba's tail or something. They did,
right.
It was clearly Jake Lloyd looking back at Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan with a weird look on his face. And it could just be that he's like, "Wait a second, why are they staying over there?" But it does kind of look like he's reacting with kind of puzzlement on what Qui-Gon just said. I don't know. That's interesting. I'll have to. Yeah, it's you always point out these things. We're like, I don't know what that means. I never caught that before. And I always have to go back and watch the movie like 30 times. Go like, "Nathan, why'd you do this to me?" Because now I got to figure out what this means.
That's right, man.
In a good way. I love it. But
your Star Wars thorn in your flesh.
No, it's great because like you see all these things. I'm just like, wow, never caught that, and I didn't know that was part of the that was a change in order of that dialogue was earlier, but or later actually, but that's supported by the screenplay here where it was, I thought it was like, oh, they changed it, but for the movie itself from the screenplay, but you're saying that it was originally that way. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, at least in the VHS release, because I remember the first time I saw it on DVD, I think, which was quite a bit later. I remember going, "Whoa, there's differences here." Yeah, because we ran that VHS rugged, or just it was a ragged. Yeah, it was boy, we watched it all the time. And I just remember going, "Whoa, I don't remember this. I don't remember this. What is this?" Yeah, so that was definitely one of those scenes I thought was weird, but
yeah, I really remember the pod race differences mostly. I remember like Anakin spinning, like losing his having to reconnect his engine and all that like came with that little magnet and stuff like that. I'm like, whoa, that was cool. I don't remember seeing that before. Interesting. Yeah, I have to look at all, because I know there's like someone has like a website of all the changes, of list of every single change made to every version of the film and everything. So I'll have to find that. But I also wonder, this is, since we're getting into really kind of nitty gritty nerdy stuff, I don't know. I don't think, have we ever seen, so the little, maybe he's not little, he just looks little next to Jar Jar, but the creature that's driving that speeder thing, have we ever seen that alien anywhere else?
I don't know. That's a really good point.
He has like that kind of look about him where like I feel like I've seen him before somewhere else, but I can't place it. I don't even know what his species is called or if that dude has a name. I'm sure he does. But
oh man, we have to somewhere. Because he looks familiar to me. Like I think I don't know if it's because they added him like in Clone Wars, like that kind of.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, is he in the Clone Wars somewhere, or is he? I know I've seen. I'm pretty sure he shows up in like the visual dictionary for episode 1 or something. I think that's the only other time I've seen him. But it's just one of those things where I go, I don't know if I know what this is or I've ever seen him in anything else. And now I'm like, oh, you should have it. If someone's gonna make a story with like a new Jedi or something, use that guy, use that alien, because he's underused.
Yeah. All right.
I don't know.
I gotta look it up.
Yeah, go for it.
Out the dictionary. Huh. I don't know. He looks familiar to me, so I wonder if he's there somewhere. Maybe not. Okay, let's see. His name is Mott Not Rab. I don't know. I wonder if it says anything. You just have his name. I wonder if it. Well, it says he's in the Senate. Like it says there's.
Okay, yes. I think that sounds right. I think
building.
I think his species shows up in the, in the big Senate chamber. That seems right.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just there for the. I don't know.
I'm not sure. Yeah, because this one's showing a senator, and he's gesturing an objection.
Okay.
So, but otherwise, it doesn't give anything. So, maybe I bet that's where though they're probably in the Senate building.
Yeah, that probably is where I saw him before. Huh. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, we did a little nerdy deep dive on the characters in the background. That's fun. Always fun to do that.
It is cool.
Because it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that's right. They all matter. Because somebody designed that character, George put him in.
Exactly. Right? So someone worked really hard on that, yeah. Probably Terrell Whitlack. Terrell Whitlack or Whitlatch. I always forget her name. Anyway.
Oh, wow. See, there you go. Josiah's getting the extra deep.
Well, yeah, she was one of the creature designers and concept artists on Phantom Menace. And she only worked on Phantom Menace, I think. A lot of the animals and creature designs were hers. So, really good artist. Anyway.
Nice. All right, man. I want to hear your thoughts on this next scene because I feel like it's loaded.
It is.
And I've always sensed that, even as a kid, but I don't know what. And so I'm ready for you to blow my mind again.
Okay. Well,
so what am I missing here?
Manage expectations, dude. To keep lower and lower.
Yeah.
Oh no. Well, there's all kinds of things. Just even. I don't want to spend forever on this. These little things, but they feel like they're important. This scene kind of starts this idea, but it kind of this theme, this through line I'm going to talk about, it is a through line. It goes throughout the rest of the movie, especially the prequel trilogy. So I'll just go into it, and it might sound like I'm making it might sound like I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but I do think it's kind of a big deal. So we're in Palpatine's apartment, and it's covered in these red tones. So and its colors are actually inspired by the Emperor's guards in Return of the Jedi. And we haven't seen the color red a lot in the movie. The Queen's first gown is red, and Darth Maul, and his lightsaber, he's red and she's red. So, and the red is a really interesting color because if you look at cultures across the world, red is always the first color that they discover. And every language has a word for it. There's a lot of colors that certain languages don't have words for, but they describe, black and white first. That's always black and white first, and then the first one that's really color. Because before that, black and white's just kind of shadow and light and contrast. But the first color that shows up is always red. And every culture has a word for black, white, and red, and every culture discovers them in that order. And so, and we go through this process individually ourselves. So newborns, they can see contrast between black and white shapes. But the first primary color that they see, or that they're able to distinguish, is red. And that happens in the first few weeks of life. So it's not just a society at large, like humans ourselves. That's kind of how we see it. Red is always like the first most important color. So, so why is red so important to us? It's like, why is it the first one all the time? It's what does Amidala represent? She represents life. So like the red she wears is the red of like a ripe apple, or the red of like healthy skin that has proper blood flow, and then Darth Maul, he's also the red of blood, but the blood signifies death in his case, right? He's the red of fire, the red of hell, So like red can attract us, but it can also means stay away, like stop signs, warning labels, red gets our attention. So
Yeah,
it's
that
the most
sounds good.
attention
Yeah.
getting of colors. Yeah. So when Palpatine shows up and he lives in this red world, you got to ask yourself, so far in the movie, we've seen two examples of red being used. So is he the Queen or is he Darth Maul? Well, at first we think he's a good guy, so he must be on the Queen's side. But of course, in the next few movies, that red starts to spread out from him. His outfits start getting more red. The people around, like the guards around him, start wearing red, and so that red in his office becomes red. Everything just spreads out, and so like it spreads out like a fire, and he burns the galaxy up, and all that's left is the cold, lifeless, black and white of the original trilogy. That's the empire that he's created. It's completely devoid of color and life. So the red kind of consumes the galaxy and leaves it black and white. And so, it's instead of the natural progression that we talked about of, black and white, then red, then it's like yellow, green, or blue or something like that. And then, that natural progression, he reverses it. He just takes everything back in reverse. So Lucas is playing with these really like very ancient and like deeply rooted ideas of just color can mean a lot in these movies. And many stories and movies use red to signify like important themes in the story. Like Rebel Without a Cause is a movie that uses red in big ways to talk about the themes of the story, and it gives you indications of where the story is going to go. And so he's not the only one who's done that, but he's put a lot of thought. Just the color of the room is kind of where I'm going at, where it's like this is all it's just another paintbrush he's using to create this canvas. So that's me spending way too much time on a color. So I'm done. I'm done talking about color. But yeah, this scene, just in terms of Palpatine pulling the strings, right, and setting up his whole strategy here is just really interesting because his strategy's already been interrupted a couple times. Amidala was supposed to be dead at this point in his plan, but Valorum went behind his back and sent Jedi and pulled her out of the situation. And so now he's like, okay, I'll send Darth Maul to kill her. Oh no, she survived that. Okay, she's here. Okay, well, how can I use this? So he's always kind of constantly having to change his plan, even though he does have a big master plan. Amidala kind of keeps getting in the way of it, unintentionally. So it's interesting here that he is pushing for her to, try and take Valorum down. Because if she had, if you think about it, if she had died, if all had gone according to plan, they would have been invaded. She wouldn't have signed the treaty. She would, she was forthright about that. She's going to defend her people and do that she can, but she was going to get killed. She would have, like Qui-Gon said, my feelings tell me they will destroy you. That's why he sensed that she had to leave. So she would have died, and the Trade Federation would have taken over, and the Senate, if they, or even if she had signed the treaty and then been killed, either way it happens, the Trade Federation takes over, either legally, which is again, not a good comment on the state of the Republic. If a Trade Federation, they can invade a planet and take it over, and that's illegal, what they did. Or if they kill her and do this shady stuff and that comes to light, either way, Valorum's going to get kicked out. Everyone's going to be upset with him, and Palpatine's going to end up in power. Everyone's going to vote for him so they can send, an army or send someone to go help Naboo. And so we'll elect the Naboo guy chancellor. So that's really his plan. And so that's kind of been interrupted all these different stages along the way. So now he's trying to, adjust and correct for that. So he's thinking, well, maybe I can get Amidala to do my work for me here. And since she's not dead, but I can use her to voice the plight of the Naboo people to the Senate and show them that, Valorum doesn't have any power. He's useless. We need a new leadership. And actually, he asks her to say, this is skipping ahead to the Senate scene, but it begins with him in the screenplay. It's started with him saying to her, if the Federation moves to defer the motion, Your Majesty, I beg of you to ask for a resolution to end this congressional session. She says, I wish I had your confidence in this, Senator. And then he says, you must force a new election for Supreme Chancellor. I promise you there are many who will support us. It is our best chance, Your Majesty, our only chance. So that's not in the movie now, but it's him kind of reiterating what he says in this scene to her, where it's like, well, you could move for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum. So that's him, weaving his web to actually use this 14-year-old queen who he wanted dead originally. He's like, well, I'm going to adjust my plans, and now I'm going to have her work, do my dirty work for me without her knowing. And of course, this is not at all known to the audience when they first watch this. They have no idea, especially as kids. Maybe the adults can, I don't know. I can only look at this really as a kid because I was a kid when I first saw it, but I didn't, I had no idea what was going on. All I knew was Anakin and Jar Jar were kicked off to the side. They were left out of the conversation, so I didn't really care what was happening. I was like, I'm bored. I was a little too young for it. But and then it's the last thing I'll say about it is that it's interesting from Amidala's perspective, because what's that line where he says, to be realistic, Your Highness, I'd say we're going to have to accept Federation control for the time being. She says, that is something I cannot do. She's starting to become a little more like resolute. She's kind of coming up with her own plan. At least she thinks she is at this point. She's trying to say, like, I think we need to take a stand. She's becoming a little more of the leader that she needs to be. At the beginning of the movie, she had good intentions, but she didn't really know what she had to do to save her people. She is a pacifist, and she's like, no, I don't want to fight. But then there's a point that you get to where you have to fight to defend your people, otherwise all will be lost. Like, pacifism is great until it's, people are getting slaughtered, and it's not helping. So she's kind of starting to dig her heels in a little bit more and going. She's like, no, the courts take even longer to decide. We can't do that. She's like, shutting down all these options that he's presenting. And he knows what she'll say. Probably he probably is aware of what's gonna get her goat and get her dander up, but he's trying to manipulate her. But at the same time, she's also, even though she's playing into his hands a bit, she's also taking steps to finally get to that decision we see in a couple scenes later where she decides to go back, which is a surprise to Palpatine and Sidious. He doesn't expect that, where she decides to go back and fight for her people herself with the Gungans. So this is a big growth scene for both of them, actually. And so he's, it's her becoming more and more the leader she needs to be, and it's her, wrestling with the burden of being a ruler and being so young and having to make these huge decisions, and him, being the clever behind the scenes sneaky Phantom, right? Who's trying to work everything, trying to get his plan working even as roadblocks are coming up. So sorry, rambling forever, but that's my thoughts.
No, that's great, man. I think that's great. Yeah, I like to just think that it's, or how should I say this? It's fun to watch both of them act in the spur of the moment kind of thing, Yeah, like you said, like you can see it just played out. Like you can see Palpatine. It's almost like watching a chess game, like he's moving a piece here. Well, we're gonna have to accept Trade Federation control. And she's like, no, I can't do that. Or, oh, we need to submit it to the courts. No, they take even longer than the Senate. It's interesting to watch this, like, this chess game, and to see Padmé really grow. You see Qui-Gon's influence on her, and she's taking the slow steps into a much larger world, right? I just think that's really neat. And oh man, what else was I going to say along those lines? This is also, I think, the first time since the very beginning of her very first introduction that we see actually Padmé in the Queen suit again, right? Because it's not. Oh, it's good point. Not Natalie. It's Natalie Portman. It's not Keira Knightley. As far as like actresses go, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think you're right. That's a good call. I think you're right. Because from the invasion onward, she's in hiding. You know what? I'm so dumb. I never thought about this before. That I just thought in my head they just switch back and forth just to throw the audience off. But no, it makes sense, logical sense in the story that whenever I'm an idiot, of course. Whenever Padmé is in when she has to go into hiding, she stays as Padmé. She doesn't switch back to the Queen ever. I'm an idiot, of course. That makes so much sense. You're totally right. So this is the first time seeing Padme as the queen. You're right. And yeah, and so she's the queen now for the rest of the Coruscant time, basically, because Padme disappears, right? Anakin's looking for her in the next scene. So,
Yeah.
that's wow.
Yeah.
You know, it's sometimes when you watch these movies when you're, 5 years old, sometimes you have these 5-year-old thoughts or perspectives of the movie that just stick with you forever until you're 26. Like me, I'm like, oh, well, now I was, as they say, I was today years old when I realized.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's been
sense.
like most, like every episode pretty much has been that for me. So don't worry about that. Yeah. But I thought that was kind of neat because it just going back to what you've said in the past, she really cowered up to this point. She at the beginning, she put her hope in the democracy that failed. So she hid away, right? It was that naive, almost cowardice. And now we see her take up the mantle again and she's pushing back. She's not just following the ways of Palpatine now. She's not just letting him manipulate her, which I'm assuming he's done for years, even probably before her 10 years of queen or whatever. But yeah, so I just think that's super cool. And it's fun to see her kind of grow into her, I don't know what you're going to say, the Padme we all know and love for the rest of the prequel trilogy. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that this is our kind of first look at Senator Padme, right? How she's in episode 2 and 3 where she's got this, she's much more resolute, much more determined, much more confident, and and willing to do what needs to be done. It's hard to imagine the Padme from the beginning of the movie going off on those adventures in Clone Wars, in the Clone Wars, and taking out battle droids, shooting out battle droids, and doing all this. Where she ends up at the end of this movie, right? Like it's a huge character change. Like she probably changes the most of almost any character in this movie, and because again, it is her story. This movie is. But what else was I going to say? Oh, I like in the scene that Palpatine is really telling the truth. Like he doesn't really lie in this scene at all. Which is and it's just again just how sneaky he is, because it's very easy to sniff out a lie a lot of the times, and it's very easy to look at someone and go, you don't really mean what you say. Like Valorum, for example, again, he's someone who is saying the right things, but he's it doesn't seem genuine what he says. He's lying. Palpatine is saying things that are true here. Like when Valorum's like, we were so distressed, and like I'm very pleased. You don't buy what he's saying. But here, I think Palpatine is not only speaking the truth. I think he means what he says. He agrees the Republic is not what it once was. A Senate full of greedy, squabbling delegates. But he just doesn't care. He doesn't really. He's happy about that, but he believes it, and it's sort of again like he does this again, and we see it a lot in Revenge of the Sith, where he's not exactly lying. He just has a weird spin on the truth that just makes it very, very difficult for people like Padme or Anakin to kind of see what he's up to. So it's just funny to me that he can still be the villain here and still be slimy without actually saying anything that's. I don't think he says anything here that's incorrect. He does like. Well, he said, what does he say? Chancellor Valorum has really little real power. He is mired by baseless accusations of corruption. It's like, I love that, where he's like, he totally knows he's actually corrupt, but he's just kind of, he's kind of sounds like, oh, I'm supporting him. Like he's a friend of mine. I'm not gonna, it's those accusations are baseless, but no, it's so I guess he's being a little shifty there, but yeah, it is a very interesting scene. Of course, as a little kid, I didn't care, but as I got a little bit older, I started realizing, oh, this is where he's starting to pull the strings a bit. And it's our first time really again to see it up close, because again he's been this behind the scenes Phantom up to this point.
Yeah, and I remember, well, there's two thoughts there. So yeah, I was gonna bring that up. How it's such a Sith thing to do in the prequel era. They tell more truth than probably anybody in the prequels.
Isn't that something?
And, because Dooku will do the same exact thing in episode 2.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, and like you said, in episode 3, Palpatine shares a lot of truth. Which has got, like you said, it's this little slight twist on it. It's just, George always said, I wrote Satan into these movies through Palpatine. That's exactly what he does, right? He's just a little tiny twist, but it's mostly truth. Yeah, and it just throws him off, and that's just such a Sith thing to do. I'm going to tell you most of the truth. But I've also thought like maybe that's part of the reason why Palpatine was undetected for so long, because he really believes this stuff. He's telling the truth, you know. Or Yoda reveals how the Jedi view the Sith. Oh, lies, deceit. That's what they do. Mistrust they do now, which isn't not necessarily wrong, but it's maybe not as much as they think. So yeah. But I also remember when I was a kid. So when I first realized Palpatine is the Emperor was the name when I first read it. I don't remember it was episode 1 or 2 when I first read it. It was like Senator Palpatine or Chancellor Palpatine. And that's when it clicked for me. I was like, oh, that's the same. It's Emperor Palpatine. So, but I remember going back and watching episode 1, knowing that and being like, wow, like we're seeing the Emperor in action, because we've never seen that before. Even if you're an old trilogy guy, like we've never really just seen him kind of manipulate like he is. I mean, a little bit in Return of the Jedi, but this is just so different. And I remember thinking like, he just looks so different because, in episode 6, he's all white and kind of melty, all wrinkly. But here there's this like human guy who's just kind of at the top of his game almost, and just like playing these political games. And I remember just thinking like, wow, what a I don't know what I'm trying to say. What a perspective on who Palpatine is, because he's so different from this episode to episode 6. I mean, it's all intentional. Like he's intentionally putting a mask on, but it's just, I just remember thinking that like, wow, how interesting just to see the difference there. But yeah.
Yeah. And it's cool. It's interesting that we get 2 characters from Naboo who are both in disguise, and they're both, like she's trying to, she's using her mask, her persona as the queen. And at this point, she's really driven as Padme, and what she's seen from Tatooine, and her experience as Padme is kind of driving now more and more her decisions as a queen. And Sidious, of course, is now trying to, use Palpatine, his persona, his mask, to work his will as well. So it's like these 2 forces, these 2 characters are putting up masks and going head to head without really even realizing it. I think he know. It's interesting. I wonder if Palpatine knows about her whole masquerading thing. I guess it never really comes up for him personally. But anyway,
that's interesting.
I wouldn't be. I mean, if I don't think he ever really saw. I guess he did encounter Padme on the landing platform while she was Padme and not the queen. So it'd be interesting. I mean, he's Sidious. I'm sure he knows everything. I'm sure he knew. Because if Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan know, and they do know, then I'm sure he did. But duality is a big theme in the film with Padme and I think George said that actually verbatim. The duality is a big theme in this movie, and of course Sidious and being the Phantom, being Palpatine is a big part of that as well. And so yeah, it is sort of this battle of the masks in the scene where it's Padme trying to use Amidala, the queen, to get her way, and Sidious trying to use Senator Palpatine to get his way. And eventually,
that's cool.
It looks like Sidious is winning, and then Padme kind of calls an audible and just like, no, actually, we're gonna go to Naboo. He's like, go back. Whoa, wait, what? And then that's what. Hey, Darth Maul, kill her. She's ruining our plans. Now you just straight up kill her now. she's not helping anymore. Yeah, so that's another thing going on in this scene that's cool.
That's really cool. I never picked up on that. Yeah. Well, you can't trust anybody from Naboo, I guess.
Exactly. Everyone in Naboo is just disguised as someone else.
They're all hypocrites. Yeah.
That's funny.
That's crazy. I never thought about
it is,
that.
And it is interesting that, I just thought about this, but it's interesting that Palpatine is from Naboo, right? That he is.
Yeah.
That again, it's that kind of snake in the garden idea, right? That we talked about with the Trade Federation before, being in this infestation, vile, creature that's invading the garden. But in this case, he's from there, and he's he comes from the place of light. It makes him that much more evil, right? He came from this beautiful. But where does he end up? He ends up on the Death Star, right? This completely artificial, dead, cold, and lifeless place. Interesting. Yeah,
that is interesting.
I never really thought too much about him being from Naboo, but that's probably significant.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, what a traitor, to think about it. Yeah, I've never really thought of him as a traitor before. That's interesting to think about him as like stabbing the galaxy in the back, particularly his home planet.
Yeah, it's true. He's invading his own planet. I never thought about that before. Like these are his people. These are his, people who grew up with, went to school with, or something, went to university or whatever it was. And he's like, yeah, kill him.
Yeah, just
It's
slaughter him.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, I never thought about him. Yeah, you're right, as a traitor before. Hmm.
yeah. That's new to me. So
Yeah, that's
there
an
you go.
extra little
Wow,
dimension. Wow, we're both, we're both like, wow.
mind blown.
We can learn. Yeah, exactly. We can both learn something. Yeah, that's why these
Yeah.
conversations are great, man. Because we both like, neither one of us is like saying this is how it is. Like we both kind of come at it together. We're
Hmm.
both kind of realized, oh wait, he's a traitor. That's so cool.
Yeah.
No, that's fun.
Man, it is cool. And I was just thinking about too, George, I read in that book, the archive book, how he talked about two he wrote Star Wars for two purposes. One is to show how a good kid can become evil. But to parallel that, how can a galaxy fall to a dictator, or how can and just politically. And here you just see that, right? I mean, you just think about that as you're talking about even Padme, right? I mean, she's using a mask, like that's the political norm here, and at least in her realm. And like, I mean, you just see kind of all the shady, fake, corrupt systems going on here, and you just kind of see it. Palpatine, I mean, he's corrupt in just a different way. I mean, he's trying to. I don't know if he's not. He doesn't feel like a Valorum, where he's just maybe just greedy or whatever, or like a trade federation. He's like, no, I want power. I want to be the ruler. Sort of that genius dictator kind of thing. Just it's different, but it's still corrupt, And he's willing to use these masks and all these fake, It's just like, wow, here's the politics. So it's just interesting to see. Yeah. And Padme, she's not afraid to use it either. I mean, she's using the mask and hiding away and not yet that bold up front. Here's who I really am. So interesting.
Yeah, she's still trying to play within the rules a bit, and it's not working, and it ends up not working for her. And so that's when she realized, like, nope, I'm going to take the mask off, and I'm just going to be Padme, and I'm going to fight, do what needs to be done, which is not this political hiding behind bureaucrats and masks and making shady deals here and there. Like, no, it needs to be, I'm literally going to walk up to the palace and, and knock on the door and say, hey, I'm taking this place back, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. It's just interesting to think of like this. I keep thinking about this chess game in my head, It's just these like, they're all putting their fake masks on while they're playing chess together. It's just like so corrupt. I don't know. I just feel the system and how broken it is at this point. Yeah. And then to hear the truths of what Palpatine's saying about Valorum and stuff. Yeah. Just like, yeah, he's got no real power, it's corrupt. The senators are garbage, all this kind of stuff. And to realize, oh, that's actually true. And we'll see that fleshed out more in the Clone Wars too, where they really flesh out just these guys are snakes, man.
Yeah, he kind of he almost like plants the seed in her brain. Like he's almost kind of saying too much, where he's going, yeah, the Senate is greedy and corrupt, but we should still use it. We should still try and do things by the book. And maybe unwittingly, he kind of plants the seed in her head. She's like, well, you just said they're greedy and corrupt, and there's no power. So maybe he almost kind of inadvertently leads her to the right decision, where she goes, oh, I should just abandon this whole procedure. This is not working at all. So that might even be like a miscalculation on his part, that he kind of almost maybe, yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure he plants the seed, but it's like I said, he's not lying. It's true that it's not the way to go. The Senate's broken, the government's corrupt. Just don't even bother, or not don't even bother, but it's good, try and save it, like she says, like, I hope you bring peace and sanity back to the Republic, whatever she says later. So don't, like, it's important to have a stable government. You don't want anarchy, but when there's a time and place for war. So
yeah. Boy, that is interesting. As you were talking about that, it just made me think, like, look how far Padme's grown, since his last interaction with her at the beginning with that hologram, because that's the last time he's talked with her, right? And he knew he could pull her strings really easy just by throwing the rules at her. But now, and he's doing that here, like, oh, well, here's our standard procedure that you're so dedicated to, the Republic's standard process here. And now she's pushing back, and it's interesting to see him, kind of like be caught off guard by what just Qui-Gon and Anakin's influence on her already. How she's changing and her adventures and stuff, and yeah, that's interesting. I never thought
those
about
pesky Jedi always ruining ruining the Sith plans. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting to think about how just naturally he knows how to manipulate her, but now it's changing, right? I've never thought about that before. How
he thinks he's dealing with the same naive, kid, and that's what he calls her later on. He says she's young, or you said it before. She's young and naive. Controlling her will not be difficult. But he finds out later that's not the case. So she's grown a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never really put that together. Huh? How he's being caught off guard by this. Yeah. Huh. That's so cool.
All right, that's it for this episode. Join us in the next one as we continue our series on the Phantom Menace. As always, thanks for listening, and on to the next one.